one's a straw clay construction, incredibly well built, very well insulated, 12-inch thick walls. It's just really a darling home. The residents all pay their own way. We did a lot of fundraising. It's a $1.8 million project, but the residents pay their own way from there on out. They pay rents from $250 to $350 a month, and they are organized in a co-op that manages the facility. So in effect, they are their own landlords. And so that's part of the way that we keep the costs down. And just some wonderful people. This particular lady was a woman who spent the last 10 years working at the university in the health center. And so as a PERS recipient, but even with her PERS, when her husband died, she lost her home and couldn't afford the place where she lived. And she's just thrilled to be there now. One of the most exciting things about the project is when you're working with folks and you get that opportunity to give them a key to their own home, is just incredibly heartwarming. And then see those individuals thrive in those homes, and the way that this has become a really tight-knit community. And that's one of the really key things about it. We talk about we're not just building homes, we're building community. That our goal is really to help people help themselves and to develop their own community, give them a sense of ownership in their homes. And the beautiful way that that was captured at Emerald Village, you see this ugly wall on the right. Two reasons I use this photo. One is because of the work crew of the residents. These were all part of the first residents. But this wall on the right that was filled with all this graffiti, and they hired a local artist, Kari Johnson, who came in and painted this beautiful mural on this wall. I mean, it's just gorgeous. And this is only one small section of that mural, but I love the symbolism of this phoenix coming out of the fire and the people dancing around it. And she used silhouettes of the villagers, including in the constellation up above, shining down on them. So at any rate, that was our first project. We're now building another project in Cottage Grove that's modeled after this. It has 13 tiny homes. 9 of those homes are going to be finished this summer, and we're in the process of selecting the residents right now for that project. And so we're looking for our next project, and we found this wonderful piece of property in the Santa Clara neighborhood, owned by Peace Presbyterian Church. They're at Peace. It's a small, dwindling congregation, and they know the reality that they're not going to be able to support themselves much longer. And they bought this property, I think, back in the 50s, in the post-war boom, with this idea of we're going to grow a church in this growing community, and then we'll build a bigger church when we grow. And they didn't grow, and so they're sitting on this vacant land. It's part of the corridor that's being proposed. It will get developed at some point. So it's just a question of what kind of development that will be there. And so our vision that we've discussed with the church is creating a project of mixed homes that would be somewhat modeled after Emerald Village, but somewhat larger. We're projecting 28 studio and single bedrooms, and then 8 2-bedroom homes. So the idea that we would kind of expand to include small families in this project. They would be organized most likely into 2 separate co-ops because 36 is a pretty large number for a single co-op. So we're envisioning 2 separate co-ops that we help to organize. And again, they would own a piece of their home and possibly even their entire structure. We're still exploring that. It kind of depends on the funding. But one of the options that we're exploring is use of what's called a community land trust, where the nonprofit retains ownership of the land, but then the co-op owns the improvement. So all the structures are owned by the co-op. And so the residents of the co-op each own a share of that co-op. They don't technically own their home. They own 1/18 of the entire project of their half of the co-op. So they have an ownership piece in this, and that's really key to the vision, and so that they take the pride and the responsibility as well as get the benefit of truly being a homeowner in that. These rents would probably be more in the neighborhood of somewhere between $600 to $700. We're aiming for about 50% of area median income. So to enable someone who's, making probably in that neighborhood of $24,000 a year to be able to have an affordable home that they can live in this neighborhood. And working very closely with the church as we develop this so that it is something that they are happy with. If you're not familiar with that building, the semicircle there on the left of the project, that's their fellowship building. And we would use that orange section as the community space for the village, where they can have their meetings and gathering space. In this drawing, and this is very preliminary, of course, and things could change as we go through the process with civil engineers and the city and so forth. But in that drawing, the kind of aqua green squares are studio duplexes, and then the light purple squares are the 2-bedroom units. And those, I think we're projecting those actually might be 2-story. So very preliminary. At this point, the church is annexing their property into the city. After the property is annexed, it will be divided into 2 parcels. And then at that point, we can purchase the vacant parcel. So we haven't even put any money on the table. We're helping to fund the annexation. We would look to go to Oregon Housing and Community Services next spring to seek a LIFT grant of probably about 1.3 to 1.5 million. We would look to do some fundraising of at least $1 million, and then the remainder of the project would be financed through the residents themselves and the rents that they pay. So that's a broad overview of the concept, and I want to come to this group for 2 reasons. One, we want to get involvement of the community, want to get feedback to see how people respond to the concepts, see if there are other ideas that we need to take into account. 2, I want to learn from your experience of what happened with the St. Benny project that got shot down. Of course, this is entirely different, but still, just find out what we can do differently to make sure that we don't have that kind of experience. So, what questions do you have?
So Gary Wildish, your hand's up. You're up first.
Okay, yes, Dan, thank you very much for that presentation. I've had a chance to go and do a tour. I was invited to the Emerald Village, and it's very impressive. And Dan, I don't know if that's possible for people to do what we did here a year and a half ago with John Alcott, but it's very impressive. It's something that they're really pretty nice units. They are small, but it's very nice. And as he indicated, these folks are able to actually have an equity position where they're living, which is an opportunity to help them gain stability in their life and grow it. And but I gotta admit that, Dan, I was very impressed with Emerald Village, and I think this is, I'm very familiar with that site. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. So they have suspended tours because of the pandemic, but we can always make exceptions to that. So I have done a couple of tours for special occasions. I just have to work it out in advance and make sure everyone's notified and they know who's coming and so on and so forth. So at some point, if there's a group from this body that would like to take a tour, we would be glad to arrange it, because yeah, I think when you see it, you get it. Which is really the nice thing of having a pilot project like this, because when we went to the Whitaker Neighborhood Council and started talking about this, they were just, a lot of them were unsure and a little dubious, and after we started building it and they could see what it was going to become, they began to get really excited, and just even the people that were skeptical completely turned around, and we've heard nothing but good comments about it. So really glad you had that chance.
Question? Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a great presentation. Now let's take off the rose-colored glasses and tell us the challenges.
Well, sure. You know, the challenges are, one is the funding of it, you know, successfully getting the grant from LIFT, raising $1 million. Now we raised of that 1.8 million that we raised for this project, 120,000 of that was from the city. We had one grant from a foundation of 40,000. We got a gift from the neighborhood program that to buy equipment for the kitchen, commercial grade equipment. And I think that was it. The rest of it was all private donations. So we feel like this is within our capability to be able to raise $1 million to do this kind of thing. And the financing on the mortgage side, that's something we're exploring. That'll be new. We haven't done that yet to get a mortgage like this for this project, but we're talking to several potential lenders. So it's really mostly contingent upon that LIFT grant and successfully writing that grant, which will be a new experience for us. But we're talking to people who have experience with doing that and very hopeful. On the other side of it is the community piece. So we've learned both through our operation of Opportunity Village and Emerald Village that there are challenges. Anytime you get a group of people together, you're going to have challenges. Not everybody is a perfect angel that we want them to be. And unfortunately, you know, we've had to evict a couple of people because they just didn't understand the program. But the beauty of this is there's a mechanism to do that. Because this is the legal arrangement with the co-op, it's not covered by landlord-tenant law. The village itself has a mechanism when there's somebody who's creating a problem for everyone else, they basically get voted off the island. And when you lose your membership in the co-op, you lose your rights to live there. So we don't want to do that. We do everything we can to try to work through any issues and problems. But then, you know, it's a given reality of human nature that you're going to have a few. But I think from our experience with our previous projects, we've learned how to effectively manage those. So, and then the only other challenge I can think of is just long term. You know, we are a new entity and just projecting out 10, 15, 20 years from now, making sure that we're doing everything that we need to do to set aside the money that we need for major repairs and things of that nature. And then there are always things that we don't know because we haven't experienced them yet that other people may be able to help us with.
Thank you. We saw that there were a number of neighbors that showed up at our meetings relative to opportunity or to the proposal that you had referenced that failed. And we're curious as to what kind of opposition you've come up against with neighbors as well as realtors. What are you hearing about real estate values?
Only good. I get that question a lot from the neighbors. Well, how's this going to affect my value? And I had one realtor tell me that because the square footage cost of a tiny home is actually more than a standard home because of things like your bathroom and your kitchen, the cost is the same, whether you're building a 300 square foot home or a 1,500 square foot home. And so since the square footage cost of tiny homes is a little bit higher, when you look at square footage costs to do your comparisons, it improves the value. And you know, just from the quality of the project, it's attractive looking. You look at it now, particularly, I mean, I'm just stunned by the landscaping of how beautiful it is. And it's just really come to life. It's just a very, you know, physically appealing. And I think that's what you're, you know, typically most concerned about as a neighbor is, you know, how's it going to look in our neighborhood? So I think in particularly in that particular property, when we talked to those neighbors, those were their concerns. And then there was concern that we're going to bring a bunch of drug addicts and derelicts into the neighborhood. And actually the reverse is true. That particular project is on a bike path that goes right behind it. And that bike path, because it was going right alongside of an empty lot and an apartment complex on the other side. Constant needles and trash and things. Now that there are people living there with eyes on the bike path, it has improved that bike path. The people are not leaving as much trash and stuff behind as they used to. and you know, other little stories we've heard from neighbors of just how pleased they are with how things have worked out. One of the things that we did with the Whitaker neighborhood was we said, as kind of a carrot to them, we said, how about if we designate 1/3 of these units as priority for anyone who already lives in this neighborhood, but who can't afford where they live. So here's a place that they might be able to, that would be more affordable for them. And you know, there's no reason why we couldn't do something like that again. And we gave a member of the Whitaker Neighborhood Council a seat on the vetting committee. So the, you know, the neighbors had input into who the actual residents were going to be in this project. When else do you get that opportunity to choose who your neighbors are going to be? All right. So just little things like that, I think, really helped the you know, those neighbors feel like, okay, well, I guess this is worth trying out. And I think all of that has proven itself. So, and of course, that was our biggest concern of what, you know, what can we do in this neighborhood to help make sure that we have good communication, people understand what the project is, and can feel good about it.
Okay. And do you have any data relative to real estate prices that realtor
Not yet.
agencies
That would be a good, yeah, that might be something that we could work on to see if we could actually have some data to back that up to see what impact it's had. We are right now getting an appraisal on the project itself. That's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, good question. I don't have that data. We'd have to do some research, and maybe we can. We've got a realtor on our board. I might ask him to see if he can help us with that.
or maybe Gary has a suggestion as to how to go about getting that type of analysis, objective analysis. Do you have any suggestions, Gary?
Oh, I'm not a realtor.
You would be better off asking Rick Duncan or somebody.
Yeah, that Rick Duncan would be a great candidate, right? But the thing that I was surprised at the pride of ownership that the folks there have, and I think if you go by Emerald Village, you'll see something that says the people that live there care.
Yeah.
I had a question.
We'd like to reflect that in a reality statement, not from somebody from their board, but, you know, from a realtor or somebody that comes from the business and says, hey, yeah.
Rick Duncan would be good.
Hey, Dawn, you're up.
We'll work on that.
Dan, this is Dawn Leslie. That is a really exciting project. I'm just delighted to see the care and attention that's being paid to those kinds of details. And my question is about how the residents are selected.
Sure. So we have, well, first of all, we form a vetting committee. And as I say, when we did Emerald Village, we used someone from the neighborhood, but then we used other community members from a couple of different agencies, nonprofits with experience that we thought was relative to the project. Did the, you know, typical kind of thing with doing a thorough background check and credit check. You know, we want to make sure that the individuals selected have the ability to pay the rent. Because the last thing you want to do is move someone in and then have to evict them 2 or 3 months later because they can't pay the rent.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing. And then we, the committee came up with this really creative process where they did a round robin where they broke up into a couple of small groups, and they had the candidates come in and went around to each one of the individual groups and spent, you know, 30 minutes dialoguing with those individuals, getting to know them, getting a better idea of who they were. We asked questions of them, things like, what do you bring to this project? What skills do you have? How can you contribute? One of the things in a co-op is that you have to put in 10 hours of work into the co-op each month, serving on the building and grounds committee or on the membership committee or the administration committee. And so you pick people that you know are going to have something that they have something they can contribute to the operation of the project. So that was a pretty thorough, and I think, you know, I don't have a lot of experience because I'm not a landlord and how landlords do it, but my impression is that it was way more thorough than what most people go through when they apply for a, just an apartment rental.
Nice, thank you.
I want to add one other thing. One other idea we've been considering for this project that would be different. Can we find a group of young adults in that 18 to 22 range that need a skill? They're struggling in and out of housing. Some of these kids that have aged out of the foster homes and really have not found their place in life. Can we find a half dozen, 10, 12 kids like that and teach them skills? Bring them onto the site, maybe even have them live on the site while it's being built, and teach them how to build, teach them how to landscape, give them some skills that are then going to go with them for the rest of their lives, so that they can be productive citizens.
Wow.
So I've been a little bit with people at 15th Night and a project called Youth Era in town about this possibility. They're very interested. We got a lot of work to do to flush it out to see, if we can make that. But I just think something like that, and then those kids wouldn't be guaranteed a spot in the village, but they would be in the queue, at the top of the list. And if they meet all the other requirements, could be some of the villagers. We wouldn't want an entire village of young adults. I don't think that would be good for the community. But if, maybe 6 or 8 of those units were dedicated for those kids that were trained. And if then that works, then we pick up that whole thing and we move it to our next site for our next project and repeat the process. So we're just constantly doing some job training and giving skills to young adults that will go with them for the rest of their lives.
Wow. Thank you.
I'm going to put myself in the queue. I have a few questions. So you said initially people are putting in 50 hours of sweat equity. So when somebody moves out and you have the next person in, how do they do that when it's already built?
Unfortunately, that's a piece we never figured out. So I had that question myself, and we never quite figured out a way to do that. So the way it works is when once you get the co-op set, they then establish the rules from there on out. I mean, we set it the basic, but it's their co-op, so it's up to them to make those determinations.
Okay.
Classic example of this was at Opportunity Village, because we do it something similar there. We built these little cabins, and we had built cabins that we intended for couples, a little bit larger. Well, when the village first started, there was a seniority system, and a couple would move out and the next person up would move into the larger unit, right? And then the village themselves, without us telling them, the village itself said, wait a second, that's not right. We should reserve those units for couples. So they set up the system whereby when a couple comes to Opportunity Village, they're put in a different queue, and they reserve those larger units specifically for couples. So, and the same thing then with this is with, the co-op, once it's set up, then it runs itself, and we train them how to do the vetting, and then thereafter they do that and they make those decisions and set up those rules.
And then I have a question about how do you control resale value to keep it affordable over time? I know for CLT, that doesn't really do that. So
yeah, no. Well, we think we've got this figured out. So it's a limited. Well, there are two possibilities. One is with the limited equity co-op, and the other is with the. It's not called I forgot the name of it. But where they own the full structure. But at any rate, the value is predetermined. So you set the value of when it's built, and there's a cap on how much it can increase. So they cannot turn around and sell it on the open market. The only thing they can do is sell it back to the co-op, because again, technically they don't own their home, they own a share of their home. And so they sell that share back to the co-op, so they have real equity. The co-op pays them and then resells it to the next member. So that's how you keep it affordable.
And then my last question was, oftentimes in co-housing communities, they're looking to specifically design the community as a mix of age, socioeconomic status, race, ability. So we're making sure that we're trying to reflect the full spectrum of possible residents. Is that something that you guys do as well?
Yeah, except not on incomes. So there's pretty much an income cap. You can't make over a certain amount. So there's a range. You have to make at least the floor in order to afford the rent, but you can't make above typically 60% of AMI, depending on, again, on your source of funding. But probably with the LIFT grant, I think we're limited to folks who are at 60% of the area median income. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, we have a very vigorous diversity, equity, inclusion plan that we work hard to try to have as broad of a group as possible that reflects the diversity of the community to the extent that we have it in Eugene. I mean, that's one of our challenges is we don't have a very diverse community. And yeah, we try to get a good mix of people with different skills. So when we did Emerald Village, the one thing that did surprise us was the age. It turned out to be a much older group than we anticipated, with over half the applicants over the age of 60. We did have some younger folk, but it's, I don't know what the average age there is, but it's probably 55 or above. It is a little bit of an older group. So that would be a challenge. And again, that's why we're looking to build 2-bedroom homes so that we can appeal to some young families to hopefully get better diversity that way.
Carrie, you're next. You're still on mute, Carrie.
Thank you. And I apologize if I'm blurry. Everybody's blurry here to me, but it sounds a lot that there's a lot of modeling after the habitat, kind of the structure. I spent a lot of years with the habitat and the sweat equity. And I know that this is on a much smaller scale, but it seems like if there were a new village, then new residents could be working on that new village as well as, you know, to prepare for openings. I think in hearing this conversation, I think one of my very first meetings with this group was when St. Vinny's was presenting, and that's why I was drawn to that meeting, because I just, you know, to me, in my mind, you know, what could be worse? You know, I mean, St. Vinny's, they have a reputation, they are well known, and I was devastated when that project didn't go through. So I'm like 100% behind this idea and this concept and the need for this. I guess my question is, once people kind of establish this co-op, are they invested besides having slight ownership? You talked about the landscaping and stuff. So are there people that in the community then take ownership of being in charge of landscape? Are there people that take charge of being able to help with the plumbing issues that might come up? Are there people there that might, my concept has always been this idea of a co-op, maybe for veterans or something, where they buy in by learning a trade and then they give back to the community by, you know, being able to provide plumbing or being able to provide electrical. Is that any kind of concept of how this group would survive? Who comes in and takes care of that?
Yeah, certainly internally, and a little bit externally too. They have one of their committee. One of the things they did on their own, we set up 3 committees: administration, membership, and house and grounds, if I'm remembering correctly. They set up a 4th committee called outreach because they wanted to do stuff outside in the community, kind of sharing their story and talents and so forth. But within the group, I mean, yeah, they certainly are helping each other with various things. So small maintenance tasks, absolutely. Yeah, there'll be somebody who's a handyman. When I was there, actually, was that today or yesterday? It might have been yesterday. One of the villagers was covering that mural with urethane to protect it. And, this was something he could do and knew how to do and had the skill to do it. One of the things we've seen, because only about half the villagers have cars, they often give rides to each other. So they're doing that kind of thing. They're divided in terms of, several of them are obviously have green thumbs. We had hoped to build a office on site And then when it got time to do it, we discovered it was too small. We had grown too fast and we weren't going to fit in this tiny office. So we scrapped those plans, and the village decided they wanted a greenhouse on that spot. So when you go by right on Polk, you'll see this little greenhouse, and the folks with the green thumb are busy in that greenhouse doing things, for their vegetable gardens, especially. There are a number of different, raised gardens, and so they're growing vegetables that I'm sure they'll be sharing with others in the community, both inside the village as well as outside the community. So yeah, there's a whole lot of that. I think there's just a real sense, for the most part, of this is a community that they have their identity in that group, and they're very proud of it and support one another. So I don't know, Carrie, did that answer your question?
Very much so. Yes, this is very, it excites me. This idea excites me a great deal.
I'm glad to hear that. One of the other cool things about it, I'll say, is that we've also had really great involvement from the community at large, both in terms of the construction of just all the different individuals and firms that are involved in construction. So it really was a community effort to build this, but even in the operation, for the first year, we had a board of community members to teach the village how to operate their co-op. And then we had a woman who came in with this wonderful fundraising idea that she wanted to help the village doing some fundraising project. And we've had someone else helping the village with some of their gardening projects. And so there's been just a number of different ways that they have been interfacing with the larger community.
Tim Felker, your hand's up.
Hi, Dan. I love the project. I love what you guys do, and have followed it for a number of years. I'd like to touch back on the change of ownership or leaving the co-op. You said that they would sell their share back to the group. How does the group have an obligation to maintain some sort of revenue base to buy a share back when someone leaves?
Yeah, so the way that works is that, so in Emerald Village, because it's a limited equity co-op, we actually set the value at $1,500, in part to keep it more affordable. So what they do is $50 of their rent goes into a fund. So it's a cash asset at this point. When I checked today, that asset was worth about $4,500, and now they're beginning to plan to do something with that money, and probably just money market it or CD. But conceivably, when it gets up to $30,000, they could choose to invest that in some way, but they'll have to keep a portion of it liquid, so that at any time anyone moves out, they've got $1,500 that they can buy out that person. Now,
yeah, that's great. Yeah,
same
it's
with
like a co-op fee as a part of their rent.
Yeah, right. And
yeah.
So the same with this. If we determine that the share, for instance, might be $20,000, we're hoping to make it more so that they have, so they're building up more equity. Because you can't do a whole lot with $1,500 if you're moving out. So we'd like to get to that point where someone, has a pretty good nest egg. And so we're still working on the financial models, but yeah, if it's $20,000 and you got 36 residents times 20, after 10 years, you're talking about a sizable lump of money. But we would have to work with them very closely to make sure that that's very closely monitored and well invested. And yeah, obviously you got to maintain a portion of it that's liquid.
Good, thanks.
I think that for us to be of use to Dan, perhaps we should talk about how the St. Vinny's car camping program went south for us, and what we might have learned from that experience with our neighbors, and how we can proactively have a different outcome this time. So, does anybody want to start, or?
I don't even want to touch that.
Well, I think it's an important lesson in, what we can do differently, perhaps.
I mean, did St. Vinny's make any mistakes, or it was just a matter of it was just doomed no matter what they did?
Well, I think it started before St. Vinny's, perhaps, when the city put its foot in the cow pie by wanting to have a rest stop up here, but only decide, like city council made a decision to put one in a park in Santa Clara, and it was going to happen in 2 weeks. And there hadn't been any community outreach, any discussion, like, I don't even know how it started, but it was like a wildfire and it blew up. And then
Are we talking about the project where they simply wanted
three vehicles.
the homeless car thing at the back of the Hunsucker lot?
Yeah,
Yeah, and so this is a slightly different thing, and because we're not talking about people came because they had this image of homeless, and especially as they were encountering the illegal homeless people along the street as they were trying to get to work. And so I think there might be a different, if you're talking about actual structures and people moving in, the word homeless doesn't really fit that. So I don't think it would be such a trigger as it was with
Well, that may be true, Jerry. However, when you start talking about affordable housing and low-income housing, I can't believe the mindset of a lot of people is that poverty is still a crime. And they're going to come out of I guarantee there'll be people coming out of the woodwork thinking that these are criminals moving in. And once you start them coming in, they're just going to come in droves. And I agree with what you're saying, that it was really sort of a homeless thing, but you have to figure out where that line is. So in as much as you can make it not a poverty sort of focused thing for people, I think the better off you'll be, and we should make it an opportunity sort of thing. But still, I can foresee a whole bunch of opposition just based on what we saw last time. Communication is key. Unfortunately, we have a lot of folks who just don't participate in the community organization or pay attention to what's going on until someone posts on their particular social media feed, oh, there's a meeting and you better show up because they're trying to screw you. And it's unfortunate, but it's true.
Anne, your hand is up.
Yeah, Dan, first of all, I'm very impressed with what I've heard tonight. I think it would be an asset to our community, and I truly support it. I, too, hear the message here in terms of what did we learn from our other experience. And I think I agree, communication is such a huge issue. I wish many more of our residents were here tonight listening to all of this, because it would alleviate a lot of their fears. And a lot of it is about fears. And so as we move forward, I think it's going to be really important to keep that communication open and the information sharing. And with the coronavirus, we may be challenged in the way we do that. But every step of the way, rather than waiting till the excavation starts and everybody gets scared and starts overreacting, I think it's going to be really critical that we keep the information flowing along the way as this project progresses. Because I think if a lot of people heard what we heard tonight, that would alleviate a lot of the fears. But when you think low-income housing, you know, all this baggage it carries for people, we're going to have to deal with and inform and educate people about that, because this is a great opportunity for our neighborhood and for the people who will live there, and they can be an asset to our community. It's just going to be really critical that the communication is open and that we do as much information sharing along the way as we possibly can.
I agree. And there's all kinds of other areas in the neighborhood this would be ideally suited for.
Gary Wildish, your hand's up. You're mute, darling.
Yes, and I think Ann hit it on the head. Education. I think everybody that's on this call needs to have an opportunity to see it, not hear about it, see it, experience it. And I think every board member should have that opportunity. And that's why when the opportunity becomes available, we should take advantage of that, because, you know, everything's speculation unless you really physically know what you're talking about and have experienced it and been there. And so that's why the educational opportunity for all of us is important. And you're going to get kickback, as we've had on so many things. And but that little event that we had out here that I was terribly aware of, because at that time I was on the LTD board, and they caught flack heavily on that. And that was done very, very poorly by all people involved. It wasn't just one or the other, it was everybody. And I thought LTD should not have been in the position they were in, but they opened their mouth and they got it shut. Thank you.
Rini, your hand's up.
I asked Dan a question in the chat, but you might have missed it. Is this going to be, will this project be allowed by right, or will you need to do a land use application once it's annexed?
Sorry, Rennie. I replied. I replied to Tim,
Oh.
not to you.
Okay.
Yeah,
didn't
I
realize-
see that.
Yeah, so Tim knows the answer.
Okay.
No, this does fit surprisingly under R1. We actually don't need approval from, we need approval from the city for various things, and invariably doing a project of this size, you'll be asking for variances on this or that, where
Sure.
the street comes out and things like that, and design standards. But because it fits under R1, my understanding is it's by right. Now, people ask, how can you do multifamily, something this size under R1? There's a special, and I forget the name of it, under the code, there's this special dispensation for limited income controlled projects. And it allows a 50% bonus to the R1 standard. So that's what allows us to get up to. In fact, I think we could even go up to something like 44 units on a lot this size under that. So yeah, that's the good news. We don't have to appear before any kind of land use hearing.
Excellent.
So yeah, we still want to get have neighborhood support as much as possible.
Sure.
But yeah, we're not dependent on their approval.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dan.
And I would just add that with the with St. Vincent's project and with community supported shelter project, a lot of the rub seemed to be about the vetting process, and are these people drug tested? And the bottom line was that there's no drug test. The angry people in the community said there's no accountability, that there's no policy that requires them to be clean, and so why would they? And then the whole misguided notion that having safe places for homeless people to camp and sleep means that you're bringing homeless to us that we don't have, and we're making a highway for homeless to our community by doing that. And so we will have an uphill battle to try to explain that it's not poverty is not a communicable disease, it's a community disease, right? And that we need to work on that together to fix it. And being close to it doesn't mean you catch it. It means you get better at being compassionate about it. And so, we have a lot of work to do in our community to get there. So.
I have a question or a thought on that too.
Go.
I think that's really well put, Kate, and I appreciate Gary's comment that we need to take the opportunity to become more educated ourselves. And to me, that implies a next step, which is being an ambassador for this project in the community. And that I find a little challenging in COVID, and knowing like if all of us, like all 12 of us or something, we were a tiny little group of people, and us knowing about it isn't nearly as if we have that ambassador side, that who do I talk to? How do I talk to them? That part feels a little challenging because I don't know those people who came to that infamous meeting. And it's, the people that I talk to on a regular basis in my neighborhood are pretty reasonable and are all pretty excited about affordable housing. So getting out into that larger universe of 20,000 Santa Clara community organization residents, I don't know how to do that.
I'm wondering if maybe we can't, on our website, if there were like a virtual tour, like somebody with a camera walking through Emerald Village, talking to residents, taking pictures of the dwellings, like there's the fear that, oh, tiny little houses, that means there's going to be like piles of stuff outside because there's no place in their house for them to put that, like that's such a big thing for St. Vinny and the car camping program too, that, they have rules about, but just if there were a virtual tour that could take people through it and say, look, there's community buildings and they have a sense of community and they take pride in the cleanliness and attractive qualities of their housing, and that, like on some level, they're so much better off than the rest of us are, who are saying, you're scaring me. And so
that's a great idea.
Yeah, because that would be something everyone could see.
That's a great idea.
Everybody to visit.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I like that.
You guys probably have some of that media too, right?
Well, we've got a ton of videos. If you go to our website, there's just all kind of Huffington Post and public broadcasting, and this guy, I don't remember his name. There's a cable show called Tiny House Nation, and they did a tour. Gosh, when was it? I think it was in November, but at any rate, it should be rolling out anytime, where they're devoting a whole 30-minute episode to us. So that's going to be fun to see. But what Kate's talking about is a little more specific, that I think, and particularly picking up a little bit more of the community life and how it's structured and so forth. If we could do something that was targeted just for this purpose. We actually did something similar. We had a fundraising virtual event just a few weeks ago, because we still need to raise a couple $100,000 to finish the Cottage Grove project. And we did that very thing where we had the local person down in Cottage Grove walk people through the homes that are being built, and somebody followed him around with their phone, and came across pretty well, and raised over $100,000 from that virtual event. So,
Wow.
So I think, doing something like that was specific for this purpose, where an invite went out to the neighborhood, take this virtual tour to learn about, the possibilities for this project that will be coming to our neighborhood. Could be something we could put together. And this kind of thing, I don't know, we'll have to think through the timing of all of this, because this is, as I say, we don't even purchase the property until sometime next year, late spring probably, and then we'll start all the land use stuff and planning. They're probably shovel won't go into the ground until spring of 22.
Yeah, but you can't start too early in communicating. Yeah. You can definitely start too late, but you can't start too early.
Good point. Fair enough.
I would like to say, I know we've addressed this topic specifically in some of our goals in the neighborhood plan. Is there anything more specific that we can do, maybe at the action plan level, to enhance the ability to do these types of projects in the future? And I'm just throwing it out to the neighborhood plan people, because I know we've talked about it extensively, and have we got all those bases covered?
I don't think we would need Dan's expertise to figure that out, I think.
I think we have to be cautious about just adding things into the plan at this point, because, you know, we did a lot of outreach. We vetted all our goals and actions and all of that. CAC has pretty much accepted that. If we start introducing new ideas.
No,
then-
that's not what I'm talking about, Ann.
Okay.
I'm talking about the things that exist. Make sure that they are strictly compatible with these types of ideas. And so not adding anything new, but clarifying what's there to sort of encourage that type of activity. And I know we say it in words, but there isn't really much meat behind it. So is there something we can do at an action level code-wise to encourage that type of development?
I would go at that a little more simply, Tim. I would just ask if Dan would do us the favor of reviewing the draft neighborhood plan simply to bird dog if there's anything that conflicts or makes it harder for you to do what you're doing. Like that would be the place that I think would be helpful.
Well, there you go. That's certainly a place to start. And so, Dan, you need the link to the neighborhood plan.
Yeah, sure. And, I can have our folk look at it and see
Just,
if they're in.
Just simply that if there's something we've said or a way that we've said it that makes your job harder, we're right in the process of finalizing the draft. We want to be able to just, grease those skids or adjust a wording so that it doesn't make your job harder.
Well, let me ask you this question. Have you developed that with HB 2001 in mind at all?
Yes, but also the landscape of HB 2001 is shifting all the time. So we devised a corridor study plan that implemented a lot of what we thought HB 2001 was going to be, and now the rulemaking part of HB 2001 is coming up with some slightly different ways of interpreting it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, well, I did look at the corridor plan, and it looked very intriguing. The reason I asked that is because we do have another model that we're trying to build in Springfield of a micro village on a single lot. We're taking a single R1 lot, building a home that will be subdivided into 4 apartments essentially, and then an ADU that will be divided into a duplex. So on a single lot, you now have 6 units. And I think that fits well under HB 2001. And due to the rules in Springfield, it works there. I don't think it would work in Eugene. But it'd be something you could take a look at and see, could we see this kind of thing working in our plan? How would it fit in?
I can tell you that from the neighborhood plan perspective, the first thing you would hear is, where do all the cars go?
Yeah, sure, great, yeah. Yeah, fair enough, yeah.
Okay, do we have more for Dan, anybody?
I'm just wondering where we're going to hit the pinch point where an application becomes public and people become upset. I'm just trying to figure out where that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't, I haven't gone through this process quite this way before, so I'm not clearing that myself. My project director might have a little better idea. Certainly, when we subdivide the property, there's really nothing that is said about the intent for when that property is subdivided, so there's nothing public at that point. So yeah, when we go to submit our plans to the city, probably in the fall of 2021, maybe summer 2021, there might be something. I'm not sure what generates any kind of a public, that we're required to do. I would think we would want to be out in front of it. Our preference would be nobody reads about it in the paper that hasn't already heard about it from us. So we want to do as much as we can to try to reach out to the neighbors. And you're not going to hit everyone, but at least to the immediate vicinity and through your networks. so that hopefully not too many people are surprised if it does, make the papers.
I guess one of the things that I recall has happened in our neighborhood is when developers purchase land and then they have kind of an outline of what they want to do, and then they come to the neighborhood with that, and people feel like it's kind of a done deal, and you're only coming to inform us. You're not really coming to listen. You're not really going to change much of what you have planned to do for that area. And that's where the frustration comes in. So anything we can do up front to inform people, again, I'm saying, will be to your advantage and our advantage in terms of being totally open about this process. This is what we're thinking about. We're thinking about buying this property. That would even be better than say we have purchased the property and here's our plans for on that property, because then people don't feel like their input is really listened to in the way it would be if it was a little prior to that. So I don't know if that's feasible, but I think it helps with the public.
No, it can. I mean, as I say, since we don't actually purchase it until next year, I mean, yeah, we've got time to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point, Ann. And I also think that, I don't want to overemphasize our role. I mean, we are the Santa Clara Community Organization, but I will say that there are many more, maybe more active or effective social groups like the Grange, like the VFW, like the churches. I mean, maybe, I don't know, Dan, you don't have time to reach all these groups, but there's a lot of existing social structures throughout Santa Clara that would be good places to take the kind of message that Ann's talking about in the interest of getting in front of it. And I don't know if that's your role or if that's something that a subgroup of us at the community organization can take on or take some responsibility for that as ambassadors. But we are not the best place or certainly not the only place that people gather and socialize and connect.
Well, any guidance you can give us of of doing that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, it's a conversation we should have as an organization.
Any other things for Dan? Anybody? Well, so far so good.
Great job, Dan. Thanks.
Yeah, great job, Dan. It's beautiful. It's very inspiring.
Thank you very much. It's very heartening, encouraging. Really appreciate all of what you've offered this evening. It's why I do this work. So I'll look forward to continuing the conversation as we go along.
Great. Thanks so much, and thanks for taking the time to share with us tonight.
All right.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night. Okay, so next on our agenda, it would be real. Oh my God, I got it like open 17 times.